The information provided is for informational purposes only and is subject to change without notice. This podcast session does not constitute, either explicitly or implicitly, any provision of services or products by Parity Technologies, also known as Parity. All statements, including forward-looking statements made regarding companies, securities, or digital assets, are strictly beliefs and points of view held by Parity or guest speakers, and are not endorsements by Parity of any company or recommendations by Parity to buy, sell, or hold any security or digital asset. Parity and its clients, as well as its related persons, may, but do not necessarily, have financial interests in securities or digital assets or issuers that are discussed. Welcome to Relay Chain, a podcast produced by Parity Technologies, where we discuss all things Substrate, Polkadot, and Web3. Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Relay Chain podcast. I'm super excited. I'm here with two amazing folks, Tomaž and Žiga from the OriginTrail project, a OG project in the space that is moving into the Polkadot space as well, as you may have already heard. But we're going to dig deep into the project today and get to know some of the details of what they've been working on. So welcome, Žiga and Tomaž. How are you all doing today?
Very good.
Hey, thank you very much for having us. Yeah, it's been a good day. It's been a few good weeks. It's exciting, and it's great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're just going to dive right into it. And normally I like to start very high level, and then we drill down as we speak and see where the conversation takes us. So I'm not sure who wants to take this one, but who wants to give us a very high level overview of what OriginTrail is?
All right, that will be me. Essentially, OriginTrail is an ecosystem behind the Decentralized Knowledge Graph. And Decentralized Knowledge Graph is organizing world's most important assets, be it physical assets or digital assets or real-world assets coming from supply chains, so physical assets that we can touch and see, and making those assets essentially discoverable, verifiable, and valuable through this decentralized knowledge graph technology. And decentralized knowledge graph technology has been around for a while now. The network was launched back in 2018 after we introduced the token. And also after that, the network itself has gone through a very kind of accelerated adoption journey. The OriginTrail network has been used by many companies from supply chains. So right now it's being used by majority of North American retailers to exchange audit reports. And all of these auditing reports are essentially encompassing over 40% of all the imports to the United States. So we kind of pride ourselves with the adoption in supply chains. And these assets that are being exchanged in decentralized knowledge graph network are essentially assets that are also then going to be transitioning towards the Polkadot ecosystem as we deploy the technology fully on the Substrate technology. We have a very active community within OriginTrail. They have been setting up nodes within the network. They have been making videos, even rap songs. On the other hand, we also have an ecosystem participants, which are a little bit more enterprisey because they use technology for their enterprise purposes. One of such use cases I already mentioned. So it's a kind of very, very lively community of both Web3 participants, so people from the crypto sphere, and people from a little bit more traditional enterprise world. And all of this is creating a very, very nice and interesting mesh of like technology-driven enthusiasts, and also on the other side, people and communities, the enterprises, which are validating the technology as they're using it.
Wow, that's amazing. There's so much that I want to unpack there. Trying to keep it high level still, and as we move down. So you mentioned there's a lot of different folks that are involved in the project, a lot of different types of people in doing some of the research for this, which is your project has been around for a long time, so it's very well documented. It was very easy. I found that you've identified like 4 key users: the data providers, creators, holders, and viewers. Can you talk about these different users and what their role is in the ecosystem?
Sure. Let me dive into the different user groups that we have within the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph and really bring it up to speed also to the kind of current state of OriginTrail ecosystem. So let's kick it off with asset publishers. On one hand, this is like the group that really focuses on putting assets on the decentralized knowledge graph, and it's a very colorful group at that. You can find enterprise, like Žiga was speaking before about publishing audit reports as an asset. You can publish a physical product as an asset. You can also publish stuff like digital art or NFTs as an asset as well on a decentralized knowledge graph. So whoever is publishing those assets or updating them, so adding certain stuff to it, building out this graph of information about a particular asset, those will be counted as asset publishers. On the other hand, we have asset consumers. So those will be the users that are looking at those assets. So anyone trying to query, find a particular asset and verifiable information or verifiable data around a particular asset is considered an asset consumer. So those are kind of like the two sides of the publisher and the consumer. And then in the middle, what we find is basically the decentralized knowledge graph, which consists of a public infrastructure, which is a decentralized peer-to-peer network run by nodes. So globally deployed nodes, which is currently over 2,500 of them around the globe, upholding this decentralized knowledge graph. So they're the DKG node runners. And from their perspective, they are actually the infrastructure that the asset publishers are compensating for things like data longevity. So we have that data persistence that is required and expected from a decentralized system. And that is also the basis of this the tokenomics inside the decentralized knowledge graph.
Okay. All right. It's starting to become a little bit clearer to me. So there's this decentralized knowledge graph, and then there's also this blockchain, which are two separate entities, which I want to get into. But first, I want to ask, like, why do we need OriginTrail? Like, what is the problem that this project is solving?
Yeah, so essentially what Google did for discoverability of information, OriginTrail has been doing for discoverability of assets. And if we want to really make assets discoverable throughout different legacy ecosystems, like the legacy systems used by the companies, or even different blockchains, and right now we have multitude of blockchains which are not interoperating amongst themselves properly, with one exception, which is Polkadot. We can come to that a little bit later. We need a certain middleware that is going to be capable of connecting information about assets from different legacy systems as well as blockchain ecosystems. And OriginTrail does just that. So it is a Google for Web3, driving discoverability of assets. In addition to what Google does, and OriginTrail is completely different than Google in that sense, is that it also brings verifiability of information because it's based on different blockchains, and also the network itself underpinning the decentralized knowledge graph is being governed by certain game theoretical mechanisms. So it brings verifiability of those assets. And then the third component, which is value of assets. We believe that the value of assets is a function of visibility, discoverability of assets. So the more eyeballs you can get on a certain asset, the more valuable that asset is. So henceforth, OriginTrail is not only driving discoverability, verifiability, but also value of asset. And these three kind of components are also the reason why OriginTrail needs to exist. And if we look at the examples in supply chains, where OriginTrail essentially is not only driving discoverability, but also verifiability of certain claims, henceforth assets, we really need such systems, because only by having these systems, we can really prove that things that have transpired in important systems, such as supply chains, are really serving the humanity, that products were not tampered with. One such example is the pharmaceutical industry we're involved in. We're also helping donor organizations, pharmaceutical companies, to be really sure that the donated medicines that were dispatched to third world market, also India, are traceable, and that they can really see, and that users of those medicines can prove that the medicine has reached the intended destination and it was applied for the patients where these people need those medicines. And you cannot do such an operation without a system such as OriginTrail, which is driving also verifiability of such claims. So we see OriginTrail to not only be important for the things which are happening right now in the Web3 space and are sometimes esoteric for the mainstream users. Actually, OriginTrail is intended to alleviate certain pains, poor transparencies, kind of opaqueness in supply chains and in other systems of human activity. And in that way, we see that OriginTrail has a lot of applicability and also noble whys for its existence.
That's awesome. Supply chain is a one of the first use cases that I heard for blockchain when I entered the space in 2017 and 2018. And that's when I first heard about OriginTrail, because you guys have been around since back then. So let's do a little bit of a history lesson. You guys started on the Ethereum blockchain as an ERC20 token, and then you've expanded to all of these other different chains. Let's talk about how that went and why that happened.
Yeah, it's been a long history. Actually, the Tomaž, myself, and the third co-founder, Branimir, we already met each other in high school, actually. So it's been over 15 years, I guess,
since counting.
Since we were getting old. And soon after, as soon as we finished our college, actually, we were about to finalize the master's degree, but we never finished it because we decided to pursue our passions within the transparency and trust space. Also, Branimir, he's actually the only one who finished his master's because he really needed that as an engineer. But anyhow, long story short, we started working seriously on certain supply chains projects already back in 2010 when we helped local producers of organic products to differentiate themselves against cheap imports by revealing more information about the products, organic products, to consumers. And that was a centralized system. Back in the days in 2010, blockchain was not mentioned as a trust network that could be used for supply chain purposes. So we started by building centralized systems up until 2016 when we started implementing Ethereum initially, and then also saw that blockchains and supply chains are not immediately reconcilable. And this is when OriginTrail open source technology was born, initially through white paper, and then in 2019, in the beginning of 2019, as a network, as a decentralized knowledge network. So we have a history, and also we have had a lot of iterations based on the real world experience, which really helped us deliver a technology that can really serve the purposes, the noble purposes, which we feel are most important, which someone has to kind of tackle.
Yeah, it was like the whole, since the inception of OriginTrail, of OT, the expansion was like a red thread throughout it, because there was a few inflection points that really enabled further exponential growth as they happened. You mentioned that we started off on Ethereum, which is correct, and in that time, 2017, it was looking at the capabilities that OriginTrail as a kind of like a layer above network required was really strong smart contract functionalities. Ethereum at the time was really like years and years ahead compared to anything else that was on the market that really was in production, and stuff that we were working on needed production level capabilities. It wasn't really that we were messing around with testnets from the get-go. These things that we were working on were deployed in production on decentralized infrastructure. But as a design, OriginTrail was always designed as a multi-chain network. So it was always intended that as a layer above, so like a layer 2 peer-to-peer network, it could connect to multiple blockchains. And this has then been realized last year in 2021 when we have created the first implementations on some of the kind of additional next to Ethereum, Polygon, and Gnosis chains were enabled, which is great because we could validate that stuff like that actually the network could be connected to multiple different blockchains at the same time. On learning at the same time also about how Polkadot is approaching the whole multi-chain future and interoperability across blockchains was in our eyes something that really was aligned with how we were thinking about the future of Web3 from the architecture perspective, from the perspective of the value propositions that it should have, and what really OriginTrail was already focusing on and trying to achieve. So Polkadot was really kind of well suited to be looked at and a very powerful component that can be added next to the DKG, so to the decentralized knowledge graph, to really enhance it even more. So that's really where also kind of we decided that path makes a lot of sense to bring DKG capabilities to Polkadot and unleash those network effects that we were already working on or are already working on within the DKG level, but then also have a blockchain layer that can further supercharge that whole thing. So that's kind of where we see, again, another huge boost, and all these different steps were exponential growth moments. And those are ahead as well.
That's amazing. It's so interesting to hear that you guys had this vision from so long ago, starting on Ethereum and then slowly moving on and migrating to different chains, and soon you're going to be coming to Polkadot, and this was the goal from the start. And we're going to talk a bit more how you are able to have an instance of your project on all of these blockchains, but still be able to communicate. So yeah, like what are the implications of having your token and technology on all of these different chains? Like, how do they communicate, and what does that mean for the ecosystem that you're serving?
First and foremost, when we really went multi-chain last year, it meant immense efficiency gains. Using two other chains besides Ethereum, initially today's Gnosis XDAI and Polygon, which actually used to be Matic, it really kind of brought certain efficiencies that we needed, and especially working in supply chains. Supply chains are very cost sensitive, and this really expanded the network itself. So the decentralized knowledge graph essentially grew, I think, over 15 times in just a few months because of that feature that we implemented, so attachment to other chains. And of course, we're talking about different consensus mechanisms. So this is mostly the reason why these massive efficiency gains, we kind of were able to attain them. And perhaps the main difference between what we see with Polkadot and other chains that we're attached to, we would not be sacrificing, I would say, efficiency, whilst not retaining the level of decentralization with Polkadot. And that's the main value proposition here, besides the network effects that we aim to attain by implementing, also integrating with Polkadot. And this is really also something that we feel very excited about. What Tomaž mentioned, network effects, whilst retaining decentralization, also whilst retaining cost effects, is something which we believe OriginTrail is really going to be flourishing into the future. We even have one of our advisors is a formulator of the network effects law, Dr. Bob Metcalf. They even named the law after him, Metcalf's law. And it's really not a coincidence that we aim to base everything that we do on the network effects. And the main difference also between other chains and the Polkadot as a layer 0 is that you can also seamlessly interoperate with other participants, with other projects in the ecosystem without having to sacrifice the efficiency, very much needed efficiency, and retaining decentralization. And this is where kind of the bread and butter of the OriginTrail's integration to Polkadot is going to be created, because the collaboration between, for example, us and also Akala, which has been our partner for a while now, and other parachains in Polkadot ecosystem, is really not only going to be a sum of its parts, but much more than that. And if we look at the law of network effects, we can at least theoretically calculate what this effect is going to be. And we count on this effect to really be a tremendous effect on not only us as a OriginTrail ecosystem, but on each and every parachain that is going to be in some way interacting with the OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph.
Okay. We're getting into the juicy bits now. We've kind of tiptoed around it a little bit, but we've mentioned the decentralized knowledge graph, the DKG, a couple times. But we also know that OriginTrail is a blockchain in itself. So can you please dispel the mystery for me? What are these two different entities, and how do they work together?
Sure. So basically, They are two different network layers. You can picture them like that, right? So we look at blockchain as a trust network, which is great for things like transactions, things like smart contracts, and identities and stuff like that, which is inherently what blockchains were designed for. They weren't really designed for handling data, especially not connected data. And this is what knowledge graphs, on the other hand, were. So the knowledge graph is technology used by, most popularized by Google as they mapped out the World Wide Web. Today used by Amazon to give you product recommendations, Netflix to let you know which series you're going to watch, NASA for handling a lot of linked data that they're doing. So wherever you have like linked and structured data, knowledge graphs are found there. So what we've done is basically we've taken the knowledge graph as a database, and we overlaid it over a decentralized network. So you created a decentralized knowledge graph, and that is upheld by a OriginTrail network. So this is the network of a few thousands of nodes globally, which are upholding this decentralized database, performing as a decentralized knowledge graph. And this knowledge graph is then connected to the blockchain underneath. So we do have two separate layers. So blockchain layer, and then there's a decentralized knowledge graph layer, which are separate in their infrastructure as well. So they're entirely separate, but they're connected because the relationship between the users of the DKG and the DKG infrastructure, so the nodes, is done in a trustless way using smart contracts on the blockchain. And because of its design, it can function on multiple blockchains at the same time, as long as those nodes that are a part of the infrastructure are present on these different blockchains, right? So that's basically the requirement. And then we have this very resilient kind of setup where you have a network being able to rely on multiple blockchains. So if one goes down or something happens that makes users go away from a particular blockchain ecosystem, they have other options to look at and still use the same kind of layer 2 network that is OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph. So that's kind of the division. And what we're seeing right now with parachain capabilities, or what Polkadot really brought forward as well with Substrate technology, is that we can create a blockchain layer which is going to be entirely tailored for the DKG. So that's the cool part, because they are two components, but right now we have a technology where we can design the blockchain layer in a way that it's going to be as performant as possible to really make the best use of the DKG. So that's something that we are very excited about as kind of this multi-chain future also within Polkadot starts to go forward. Is you're going to have a tailored piece of technology, but others will be able to leverage it via the relay chain. So that's like that's a very interesting setup, and it goes very well with what Žiga was speaking about before on the network effects.
Yeah, so I guess the main delta between just using other chains and getting our own purposefully built parachain, Polkadot parachain, is that there's going to be efficiency gains. And secondly, the parachain is going to be tailored for the needs of the DKG in a way that we can also deliver certain network effects whilst being connected to other parachains in the ecosystem. And the cool thing is that in the moment when we integrate our own parachain, we are going to be able to transition all the adoption footprint from other chains onto the OriginTrail parachain. So I guess the main, I would say, difference and one of the biggest value propositions of OriginTrail on parachain, so OriginTrail parachain, is going to be that the real world adoption is going to start happening in the moment when OriginTrail parachain is fully deployed.
Okay. So let me see if I got this right. So in the current state, you have instances of, I guess, your own suite of smart contracts on these different blockchains, on Ethereum, on Gnosis and Polygon. And these smart contracts all allow users to interact with them, and they filter through to then touch the decentralized knowledge graph, the same decentralized knowledge graph.
Correct.
Very cool. And so the goal here is that once you migrate to your parachain, all of the traffic from those separate blockchains is going to be also migrated to your parachain?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the idea, right? Because we didn't have so far a tailored blockchain layer, and parachain makes this possible. So that's why we feel that the proposition of having something that's so tailored for the use of DKG should drive the traffic towards the parachain. Of course, it's a decentralized thing. If someone wants to use A, B, or C, they can. But just the value proposition of having something that's tailored, it's very strong. And for the first time, the OriginTrail ecosystem is going to have a blockchain layer component.
Okay, cool. How does it work when, because I know you guys also announced that you're going to be launching on Akala. So how does that work where you're going to have an instance of your smart contracts on Akala, similarly to how you have on Gnosis or Polygon? Does anything about that change when you get a parachain? Does that also get migrated?
Yes and no, I guess, is the is the most fair answer. It is changed because as we have a parachain, there are certain functionalities that will directly be available to because of the fact that we're all connected to the Polkadot. But there's also capability of deploying DKG smart contracts on Akala with their expected support for EVM smart contracts. That's going to be much kind of even easier. And then that's going to also be a route that's possible. So that support can be either directly through the Akala's parachain or through Polkadot, basically utilizing OriginTrail's parachain. So it might be a decision based on a particular use case of what someone is deploying for and what they're using DKG for.
Okay.
The option is still going to be there. So OriginTrail remains a multi-chain network. However, it's going to be up to each user to decide if they want to use Ethereum. Fine, they can still use it. It's going to cost a lot, but but the option is still there. It's going to be and remain multi-chain.
I see. Okay, so the user has the option, and normally the user goes for the more the faster and more efficient option. So I think we can kind of see the direction that's heading there. Very cool. Okay, so we talked about the decentralized knowledge graph, and that kind of gives the stage for this concept that I heard first from you folks about the semantic web. Can you talk a bit about what that means?
Sure. So the semantic web is something that has been, even as a design of the internet basically was created, was something that was kind of a concept that was sought for. And it's just a thought or a concept where it seems highly likely to have in a digitalized world that will have a chance for the machines to be able to talk to each other. But in order to achieve that and have those conversations, quote unquote, be efficient, we need that type of a semantic web where we're going to have not just information but also meaning attached to it as they're being exchanged. And that type of a future is possible if we have a combination that OriginTrail is very much addressing. So you need to have a combination of a trust component where you have things like identity and verifiability readily available, because you want to make sure that you know who is sending what or who is claiming what, and that you can verify that hasn't been tampered with. And you also will have the chance to have meaning associated with the information that's being shared, which knowledge graphs are all about that, right? They really enable multiple ontologies and different ways of how you can describe certain things, so that when in the future we'll have two machines negotiating a deal between a physical product and a metaverse item, that's going to be able to be done by using almost like two people would use words to understand each other and conclude certain computations on that basis, without kind of being able to leverage much more of this connected knowledge that gets built out versus just raw data. So kind of like all things around ML or machine learning and AI modeling and stuff like that can become much more powerful, but we need to do it right in order to have the right outcomes. So that's why we, like, the Web3 approach to it offers, at least from our perspective, a much greater chance of success because of these key value propositions that are enshrined in it, like the trust layer and the identities. And so the combination that OriginTrail as a DKG brings forward, we see it to be very much aligned with what the fathers of the internet had in mind when they were kind of painting the future vision of what this could become. And that, this is a step towards making that happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really compelling narrative there, and I seen it communicated a couple times across your media, going from this raw data and ascending up to knowledge. And through, I think there's like 4 different phases of taking data and transforming it into knowledge. And then what I understand about the decentralized knowledge graph is that you are now able to kind of commodify knowledge. Like, a knowledge becomes an asset that a person can own. Like, I know this thing and I own that knowledge, and then I can do things with that knowledge. I think that's really compelling.
Spot on. You speak about it in just the right direction of how we're really approaching it. And the thing is that with the knowledge also is not stagnant. So it's not just something that's like a point in time, but it's rather something that you can work on, develop, update, and it's going to be tied to any type of asset. It could be a knowledge asset, it could be a physical item, but you're going to be expanding a knowledge about a particular asset over time. And a good example also are NFTs. So 42 characters remaining the same, and then maybe Web2 website crashing down and you don't even have like the source stuff available readily, as opposed to having a 42 characters connected to an asset, which is a knowledge asset, which describes what that asset is in a persistent way, and also allows you to add on top of it. So 20 years down the line, when you want to gift that NFT to your kid, or you want to sell it on, you're actually going to be having something that's of value, because that asset graph or that asset knowledge graph is going to be there for you to pass it on together with the ownership of a 42 character token. So that's like a thing that we see to be very valuable, and it allows a whole new knowledge economy to kick off next to it.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's super exciting, and I love hearing you guys talk about it. Okay, so let's dig into the actual parachain that you are building. I understand it's called Starfleet. A little homage that's near and dear to me for the Star Trek fans out there. Starfleet is the main federation, basically, that is protecting the galaxy. So I love that there. Let's talk about the particulars of it. I presume it's built with Substrate.
Yeah, it's not going to be called Starfleet. However, the multi-chain direction that we undertook started undertaking a year ago, is called Starfleet phase. And within the Starfleet phase, we decided to engage with several chains, and then kind of the pinnacle is represented by the Polkadot integration. So the OriginTrail parachain, and we call it OriginTrail parachain, which is based on Substrate technology. So the name, it is part of the Starfleet phase. However, the name is still kind of very much straightforward, OriginTrail parachain.
But we're super happy to hear you be excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got to make sure I get it right, though. So OriginTrail, the parachain, is going to be the kind of facilitator to bring all of these different races, if you will, from different blockchains together to form the Starfleet Federation in this phase.
There you go.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it is a substrate-based chain that will be deploying, and it's for us, we mentioned it a little bit, but it's really about having the capability of creating a blockchain layer that can understand the DKG. It's very powerful, right? And Polkadot really enables that. It's not possible with the current kind of infrastructure that's available out there, but just because it wasn't built that way. And here you have a chance to build something on that can be so tailored, but at the same time have the shared security element, which is again, for a project like us, or for an ecosystem like OriginTrail, is so powerful because it really allows you to focus on, again, what kind of your core strength is. And in our case, it's really the decentralized knowledge graph and how to make the most out of it. And with this OriginTrail parachain, it's just going to be the perfect blockchain layer, a perfect component to not only use, but also enhance the capability of DKG by having this blockchain layer. Again, like we were talking about how much impact just the multi-chain deployments had in the last year, we see like equal amount, even if not more, because it's perpetual as well. So that's another thing that's so cool, because you can actually create more stuff as time goes on and have this, a chance to really on-chain deploy new code into the code base and have it be available and update. That's again something that's very powerful for us, because we see as a perpetual and as a motor basically that can be adapted to what the DKG has to offer, and just supercharge it, make it more powerful. So that's it's going to be like a blockchain layer home for DKG use.
And are you folks targeting to imitate the pattern that we've seen with Kusama and Polkadot? Like, are you going to have a canary network deployed on Kusama and then a main network on Polkadot?
This remains to be seen. However, our first step is going to be to secure the parachain on Polkadot, mainly for one reason. We have the adoption coming from like serious enterprises, and although we like chaos, some of the participants within the OriginTrail ecosystem would not like chaos meddling with their use cases. So the aim is to go with Polkadot first, and then we'll see in the future. We see very, very good reasons to have a canary network. That's for sure. However, we don't have that in our kind of foreseeable plans so far. But never say never. I think it's really good to have a canary network. You can play around with it. You can really do chaos with it. You can experiment. You can innovate with it. And Kusama is really home to a lot of innovative projects. And I personally hope to also see OriginTrail sometimes in the future to be able to deploy some of its crazy stuff on a canary network.
Cool. And now that you mentioned crazy stuff, I have to ask, do you have any ideas of what that crazy stuff looks like? Do you want to give us a little hint?
Oh man, there's a whole Pandora box of the things that you can.
Maybe that's an unfair question.
We've touched a few things, I think, already, like within within even what you suggested around how you can own knowledge and what's that kind of knowledge economy potential really holds. And so there's a lot of crazy idea tracks that you can follow, even just from that kernel, and you can come to some stuff that's pretty wild. But like you guys said, for really there's an existing push or existing demand for capabilities of OriginTrail to be available on a production-ready network. So that's why Dot is or Polkadot is really the one that needs to be first in order of deployment. And then as soon as that capability is going to be unleashed, then it allows us more space to look at the crazy stuff.
Very cool. Always got to try and to squeeze out some alpha wherever we can in this space, Okay, coming back to the parachain implementation. So being a parachain, your security is going to be ensured by the Polkadot relay chain. In terms of collators, are you imagining that it will be like public and open, or are you going to have a more curated set of collators?
Yeah, so that's it remains to be entirely communicated or defined. As a general approach or general principles that we pursue, we like to see things to be more open where they can be, and kind of permissionless in that sense, to create more kind of game theoretical mechanisms that can allow for network participants to join in. Similarly to how OriginTrail is a decentralized network, is also a permissionless network, so nodes can come into the network or leave the network as they see best fit for their purpose, and it creates a certain community, and it creates a certain mechanisms that we see to be pretty interesting. So as a general impulse, we'll always start from the position, can this be open, can this be permissionless, and then work our way from that. But of course, there's also good arguments for looking at it at a more selected group, especially for collators, since it's not really miners in that sense, right? It's just they're more pulling stuff together and getting it ready for the relay chain. So that there is definitely a clear difference in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on the parachain level, the security and also decentralization is quote unquote outsourced to layer 0, so to Polkadot. And in that sense, we have a little bit of a different thinking about the layer 1 than, say, the DKG network, so Decentralized Knowledge Graph network, which is completely permissionless. Anybody can join in and set up a node and start receiving data that is being relayed by data publisher. So this is completely permissionless, mainly because there is no such technology as a decentralized knowledge graph. So we wanted to base the network on a permissionless basis. And then looking towards the layer one, we already see that the decentralization and security angle is very much satisfactorily solved by the layers 0. And the main aim within this transition also to Polkadot is also to bring the nodes within the DKG on board with this parachain story. So essentially, giving them some sort of an idea of the positive outcomes for them should they decide to transition immediately to parachain layer 1. And the details of how we aim to create, I would say, positive outcomes to that are going to be known sometimes in the future. But once they're known, the idea is really to have a compelling story for the existing community of node runners. And right now we have, I think, around 2,500 nodes globally deployed, which are receiving information onto their nodes, which we hope to bring onto using the OriginTrail parachain as soon as it is deployed.
Very cool. I'm curious, now we're talking about node maintainers. Is it common for folks that are running a DKG node to also run a node on a particular blockchain that is their favorite, or across all of the blockchains that you support? Do you guys have information on that or insight on that?
Just talking with a couple of node runners, I did get an impression. I did receive an information from them that in the past, at least, they were running Ethereum nodes. So typically, the DNA of such a user is definitely connected to some experience with running nodes in one or the other blockchain. But that's like stemming from my experience whilst talking to a handful or just a couple of people running nodes.
Cool, but it's not necessary. You could just run a DKG node, or you could just run.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
These things are also getting easier. So you need to have some technical capabilities to set it up, and it's intentionally so. But it's not a blocker if you're not engaged on a blockchain layer. You can just run a DKG node.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are several web resources that people can visit. Of course, there is OriginTrail.io where people can find all the details. But we also have, at least to my knowledge, 3 community websites curated by mostly node runners. And you can find splendid information on how to run a node on OriginTrailExplain.info. I think it's .info. And then track deepdive.io, if I'm not mistaken. So if you just Google trace deep dive, you're going to find them. And there is also a project called Project One, also set up by a group of community members, also explaining the way OriginTrail nodes are operated, giving you all the important knowledge that you need when you're deciding to run a node. Also, there are some rap songs produced by one of the community members that goes by name Famous Amos. You can find them on YouTube under the chillzone.net handle. And you're going to find all the cool rap songs about OriginTrail and also some tutorials on how to run the node. So overall, it's a very savvy community that is always willing to help newcomers on, when they want to start using technology. So we're really privileged and happy to have such a splendid community.
That's awesome. I think you haven't made it until somebody writes a rap song about your project. So I think that's a good sign for you guys.
This should be like a must-have.
Yeah,
I would be. Yeah, we're light years ahead on this one.
That's amazing. Okay, let's talk about what OriginTrail is used for right now. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe you can give us like an example of a full life cycle, like how somebody would use OriginTrail today.
Yeah, so we traditionally stem from supply chain use cases, and OriginTrail in the beginnings was used for food supply chains, essentially allowing consumers, when they scan a product, say yogurt or a piece of meat, to receive all the information which has been verified by the trust network. In the past, that was like Ethereum, then Semantic, and soon we're going to see Polkadot here. So that was a first, I would say, alpha or beta supply chain use case that we got into. Then also partnering with a few world-class companies in the space, such as the British Standards Institution. We went a little bit more broadly. So the British Standards Institution, they are putting their fingers into all the sectors within the supply chains, from condoms to aviation, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and essentially what they are doing, they're deploying OriginTrail for all of those sectors. And in many kind of different variations. One such variation we already mentioned. So the North American retailers are using OriginTrail to exchange audit reports about some 22 or 23,000 factories, mostly from China, and then also exchanging these reports amongst themselves. So Walmart would send the report to Costco, but at the same time, they wouldn't know that these reports are being exchanged by the said companies. And that way, they would still retain privacy of sensitive data. And at the same time, they would gain benefits because they would not need to repeat the same audit on the same factory from China, say. So huge benefits in terms of both efficiency and transparency. At the same time, also the US kind of government bodies, the Homeland Security is going to be able to query such information. So that's hugely important, because the information about the products that are coming into the United States, it is also kind of describing where these products are coming from, and also the production methods. So was the child labor used when these products were produced? Is the factory in any way associated with any organization that might be financing terrorism? So very important topics are somehow being described within those audit reports. So perhaps going now more from traditional supply chain use cases into something a little bit more funky and Web3 based, we're also using OriginTrail to make NFTs discoverable and also verifiable, and most importantly, connected. We saw that within the NFT space, our idea is that it's not going to be enough just to have an NFT, a 42-character string, but you would also want to protect the underlying data about a specific NFT. And OriginTrail is capable of doing that. You can record information about an NFT, so the underlying asset on the DKG, which gives you essentially a protection of the underlying asset. At the same time, you can also connect that underlying asset with other NFTs that you might have created or bought somewhere. And in that way, you can create a bundle of NFTs. We call that a NFT supercharging. We even launched a project which is called an NFT supercharger, which allows you to check which NFTs exist and are already linked to DKG, and you can select them. Essentially, you can claim ownership, and then you can connect them together. In the future, we believe that it is going to be possible to also attach certain additional attributes to your NFTs or the underlying data about the NFT. And in that way, you're going to be able to essentially expand the value of your existing NFT. So this perhaps falls into a bucket to a little bit more funky use cases that we're involved in. And in the future, we aim to have OriginTrail very much kind of a retail-based project, which is not only targeting enterprise, but also use cases within the Web3 space, NFT space, metaverse space. And I'm sure Tomaž has plenty of other ideas here. This is just, I would say, a tip of the iceberg.
Oh man, yeah, the list is very long. So, there's pharmaceuticals. That's also we've just spoken more about recently. There's just a deployment for tracking donated medicine in India, over 40 distribution centers, with an ongoing rollout in over 80 countries in developing countries. So, those are huge impact projects, and more of them are happening literally as we speak. There's a little kind of also more interesting one for my particular interest is the side of the Irish whiskey. There's a startup Irish distillery that is creating the whole basically storyline around their product utilizing OriginTrail technology, and creating collateral information about the products that they're creating. So that's there's really a lot of different bits and happening globally utilizing this technology. And the one that where the thing is that I'm most excited is that there's definitely a sense of convergence that's happening. Whether we're talking about British Standards Institution issuing over 200,000 certificates using DKG, or is it the whiskey, or if it's pharmaceutical, or is it NFTs? There's a sense of convergence happening with this technology because it's a single decentralized network within which you can find all of these different assets and you can verify them and you can add to them. And especially as we are moving in the world, even the last year with Metaverse kicking off and going crazy, and 2 years before DeFi going crazy and staying crazy, to be honest, there's these concepts that we've created within Web3 that are so applicable also to the mainstream industries or the real world or whatever we want to call it. And the convergence definitely has already started to happen and will continue to do so more. And OriginTrail is the perfect platform to allow that to happen, because you'll have all these assets in a very unified way available for you, despite the fact in which system they are actually living or where they've been deployed. They've indexed here, you can access them here, you can update them, you can transfer them, and that's really where the network effects start to even more going crazy, because a particular piece of garment that you're wearing today might also be available in Metaverse, and that's going to be the same asset that you own across multiple different realms. And maybe as you move it from one Metaverse to the other, the previous Metaverse will attach information of what your experiences were in that particular case. And the second one is going to be aware of that. So they'll be able to build on top of where you left off. So there's just in terms of as a component, it allows so much creativity to happen. And that creativity, as these convergences happen with all the existing breadth of adoption that already exists on OriginTrail and is coming day in, day out, it's only opening up potential for more. So excited.
Yeah, no, I can definitely tell you're really passionate about this topic, and it's getting me excited as well. With such big companies using your product, like you mentioned some of them already, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, but you're also working with Home Depot, Walmart, and Target, like these big international companies, some of them. That sounds pretty mainstream already, but it sounds like you're just getting started. Like it sounds like you're just, there's so much more to come. So what does mainstream look like to you guys?
Yeah, mainstream is, I think it's a little bit more difficult to tackle if you are trying to push your solutions out. However, if you kind of behave in an open source manner and then invite people to test what you have, then you can really kind of, when you have them in your site, you can really show what the technology is capable of. And I remember, I think it's 4 or 3 years ago, when the innovation director from one of the most important partnerships that we have, the British Standards Institution, met our CTO, our co-founder, Branimir, in Shanghai. His colleague, that later on, I think he worked for Consensus, and now he works for a big company. So he was the one that then ran the first testnet node and really played around with the technology before they actually decided to visit us in Slovenia. And before we had 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings that eventually yielded a couple of first implementations in this space. So it's I would say the approach towards reaching out to mainstream is very much diverse. There is no one recipe. However, there is one, I would say, commonality to all of them. It's a context sport, and this is also something that was reiterated by one of our partners. Working with the Web3 companies and company working with Web3 from the mainstream, essentially it should be a context sport, because you need to grow trust between the two parties before something can really happen. And actually our uptake and adoption happened back in 2019-20, when there was still a bear market. So people were overarchingly skeptical about the Web3 solutions, about tokenized products. So we had to really go through I would say we had to go through ice. We had to break the ice and really show the value of that can be delivered with OriginTrail. We went to real world conferences, so not the crypto conferences. We mostly spent our time at certain supply chain events talking to potential clients, and then getting those potential clients to work with OriginTrail technology. One such client we met at the GS1 event, and GS1 is a global organization that delivers standards for supply chain purposes. And this is where we met a guy from the Swiss Federal Railways. And a few months later, Swiss Federal Railways would start deploying things on the OriginTrail protocol. So it's really hard to kind of conclude and say you should do this and you should do that, but it's mostly a context sport.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, and so right now you're mainly serving these big corporations, but do you see a use case in the near future? I mean, we already talked a little bit about NFTs, but do you see any more use cases for an individual user? I mean, we talked about an individual having knowledge and that becoming an asset. Like what sorts of transactions would you see OriginTrail being useful for, like an individual that has some knowledge?
Yeah, right now the next iteration of OriginTrail is called V6, and V6 is introducing a couple of very novel concepts. One of them is called Universal Asset Locator, which is essentially a cousin of URL in Web2 sense. So in Web3 sense, we call it the UAL, to kind of analogous to URL. And the aim there is to be able to attach these URL identities to just about any asset that you own as an individual: a car, a bottle of whiskey, a house, a monkey, or whatever funky NFT you might have in your pocket. And by being able to attach those identities to your assets, you're going to be making those assets discoverable. And these assets are going to be discoverable via quite a similar type of a browser or an explorer to what we know today quite similar to what Google is. So you'll be able to browse your assets. And if you're gonna want to sell those assets, if you're gonna want to grow their value, you're gonna want to connect those assets that might be coming from like different blockchain ecosystems, from OpenSea. And essentially, when someone is looking for a NFT that you might be owning, you want to see this asset pop up very high on that search rank. And we're even adapting tokenomics in a sense that you're going to be able to stake a token in order to make that asset that you own more visible in that search. So this is kind of akin to the AdSense that Google is using, but in a Web3 sense, because it's not only about the information, it's about the asset. So this kind of the infrastructure that is being built right now is predominantly going to be catering to retail users such as yourself.
That's fascinating. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what that means. Oh boy.
Yeah, we're going to have to build it, and it's going to be a little bit more easy. It's going to be easier to understand. Also, the DKG, before it was delivered, many people confused DKG with pure blockchains, but DKG was never a blockchain. So we had to build it, show how it works. And I think now people really do understand what's the difference between the DKG and the pure blockchain projects.
Mm-hmm. It's like a Google type impact, that the way how you search now for within the Web 2, and it's how you can't search within the Web 3, but then also kind of how you are able to influence the search, and how you can enrich the asset and work around it. So there's going to be a lot of touch points with individual users.
So with so much comparison to Google, I wonder if like in the near future we're going to start using OriginTrail as a verb, just like to Google something is a verb now. Oh, just OriginTrail it. Oh, you need to know that information? OriginTrail it.
That's the idea.
We'll make some proposals.
Okay, so here's a question. Do you see OriginTrail fitting into the digital identity kind of vertical that we have in the space?
I mean, the digital identity, it's a very important component, right? Because we were talking before as well a little bit about the importance of trust and kind of how you base trust, and identity is just such a core component of that. UILs are identity based as well. So the whole thing, everything, either that's an asset or that's an issuer of an asset or that's an owner of an asset, has identity enshrined in it. So we are very big users of the decentralized identity concepts and tools kind of that are built within that. It are very useful and compatible with what OriginTrail is creating as well, because it's everything is connected to that type of an approach. It also extends it because as you have these different identities, you can build around identities. So you can, if that's an identity of an asset, again, you can build out that claims around a particular asset. Or if it's an identity of an organization, you can do the same. You can build claims around a particular organization. If it's an individual, same thing. But the important component also of the identity is that you, as an owner of that asset or an owner of a particular an asset within the DKG, you are in charge of what really gets appended and how. So it's not that's how you're kind of getting away with spam, and because you can design it in a way that actually that the owner has the authority to decide of what really gets connected with the asset that they own and control. So that's a very important part of having the identity. Žiga, I don't know if you've had
and it also could be understood as an identity project, one layer above the existing identity things that we have seen, verifiable credentials from the W3C side, which has introduced something that we now use for, let's say, training certificates, which BSI is allowing its users to kind of use the DKG, and then we essentially use the standard of verifiable credentials. And then we have like different types of standards for identities within the blockchain space, whereas the UAL, so the unique asset locator, essentially is capable of describing all of these underlying identities. Branimir, our co-founder, likes to call them objects. However, kind of to really describe these different objects within the identity space, we apply this universal asset locator because we wanted to have one concept that can really interlink them all.
Very cool. So the answer is it's possible to do it, but it's also possible to do a lot of things with OriginTrail, and we're still so early we haven't fully seen all the things that will come to pass. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we're coming up to the top of the hour here. I want to touch on one more thing and then see if you have anything else to add. You folks started this thing called the Trace Alliance, of which Parity is a member of. Can you talk a bit more about what this alliance is all about, what it does, and what we can see kind of coming out of it?
Yeah, Alliance is a little bit of a more loose organization. It's not a for-profit oriented entity, but that allows us to really be working with a multitude of different companies, organizations, not-for-profits, and some of them might be even competing against each other in certain scenarios. However, having a neutral ground really allows us to talk about topics that are tying together these very diverse actors. So one such example is Parity, which has been very instrumental towards us being able to work with the Substrate technology, and using the Trace Alliance as an outlet. We were able to also bring in community members from the OriginTrail side, which are all together working in so-called working groups, where we discuss certain proposals on how we should be updating OriginTrail, and we also invite different parties. We also had people from other parachain projects joining those calls. So all of these things are kind of converging and coming together within the Trace Alliance organization, which is right now, it has quite a respectable list of different organizations. We even had people from US government organization joining the working group calls. One such example was, don't remember the guy's name, but he was from the US FDA, so a very important organization, joining the Trace Alliance call. And it's kind of very open-ended. So whatever challenge we see that we have, not only as a company or as a community, but as an ecosystem in general, Web3 ecosystem, we invite different stakeholders to join us in the Trace Alliance in order to find a solution that would be mutually acceptable and that we can all build upon.
Amazing. And that's a key kind of tenet in this space in general. Teams, even if they are competing in the same kind of vertical, can still come together and work together, because the space is still so early, and there's a lot of the pie to cut up for everyone, and collaboration is the only way we're going to get there. So I love to hear that you guys are being good examples of that. Okay, so I want to thank you guys for being here. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to tell the folks about today?
I think we touched quite a lot of things. Yeah. I'm just there's a lot of things happening in the future, but this is a little bit more tied towards having a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on in OriginTrail. So not sure if we can spill some beans here, but a lot of interesting things are going to happen in the following weeks and months, generally in Polkadot ecosystem, also in OriginTrail ecosystem. So just stay tuned, and whatever interesting question or whatever comment you might have, you can join the Telegram. Our community is very friendly. They're going to cater you with all the knowledge they have, and it's overall it's going to be fun. We have, like we said, we have plenty of rap songs which have already erupted within the OriginTrail ecosystem. So come on in, join us, and have fun with us.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment, man. Exciting things happening. Join the fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Žiga and Tomaž, for being here. It's been an amazing chat. I feel like we could have gone deeper and unpacked some more, but we'll have to sign off for now, and perhaps we'll have you back again. And by the next time, maybe you'll have a parachain on Polkadot already. Who knows?
All right. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorrin.
Thanks for joining us this week on Relay Chain. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the subjects we talked about today, so please reach out to us on Twitter @RelayChain or by email podcast@parity.io. The team at Parity has some of the brightest minds working towards building a robust and inclusive ecosystem that puts power back into the hands of its community members. With cross-chain communication as a primary goal, we aim to break down the tribalistic barriers that have formed throughout the blockchain industry. If you want to learn more about what we're building, or if you want to join our team, visit our website at parity.io and sign up for our